It's an insane day to be an Attack on Titan fan because it is officially the end. And as much as people might have memed the titling of, well, the final season, and this is now part 4 of the final season, you can't deny that whatever the production committee did at the start with naming conventions, you can't deny that Mappa and this team cooked to deliver the perfect conclusion chunk. Like, despite the switch between Wit to Mappa, this team, directors, staff members, did such a beautiful job, and as someone who initially liked the ending to this manga, I had my issues, but when Isayama added some extra pages to help clarify a bit more, I thought to myself, this is good, and if the anime does this with the extra content, I can leave the show feeling as good as I need to, but there's something about how, once again, Isayama added a little bit extra, did a little extra work. The voice acting, making scenes that were a little more cringy, actually feel a little more impactful, and I can walk out of Attack on Titan saying, not only is it still my favorite manga of all time, it's also my favorite anime, and just in general, my favorite story, and I'm a very happy camper with how they concluded this. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's final part of Attack on Titan, this hour-and-a-half special. It's over on my Patreon if you would like to see that. It's over there if you're interested. Now, we got a lot to discuss. Now, ultimately, here's the thing. There is a lot you can break down. There's a lot you can analyze. We have insane action. We have Titan shifters for days. But the thing for me that has always been the thing that hooked me into Attack on Titan is the foreshadowing, the world building, the characterization, and when paths were properly introduced and we understood why Titan shifters were being made from thin air or what the founder Ymir truly was, it was so interesting to see how all these things started to click more and more, and there's a couple of big moments that I guess at the time were pretty controversial in the manga, but at the same time, the manga community and the anime community for Attack on Titan was very different because manga community had month breaks in between chapters, so there was a lot more time to theorize, speculate. People got into their own headcanon of exactly what needed to happen, so when the Jaegerists didn't win, people were up in arms. But I always found, like, you can look at Sasha's death from Gabby, there was barely any outrage in the anime community, and goddamn, if you would have said you were okay with that death in the manga community at the time, you pretty much would have ended up getting skewered similar to how the Cart Titan does in this episode, right? But I like the fact that there's going to be some moments that will be laughed at or talked about, and whether that's, Eren pretty much saying that he wants to be with Mikasa for life. He loves her and, doesn't want to see her with other people. But at the same time, what did Eren do this for? Like, what was his ultimate plan? And, what's very important to rationalize and understand about this is he had everything in his mind all at once, pretty much. Like, past, present, it was all leading him to this moment. And the idea that he gave different characters conversations, and it was on kind of like the boat rides in. And the idea that for Armin, it was a conversation kind of going through memory lane, going to all the areas that they always wanted to see, whether it was the fiery lakes that they read about in books, to Mikasa pretty much getting what would have happened when she begged him to please just run away with her, live out your final years with me, abandon all of this. Both of them kind of got the closure that they needed to, but they didn't realize it until once Eren was dead. And Eren ultimately destroyed 80% of humanity. And that is a large chunk. He committed genocide. He straight up admits to it. And the idea that pretty much he wanted to make his people heroes. Because ultimately, if Paradise Island and the so-called devils were left to be alone, what would end up happening is Marley and other nations, were getting more and more advanced. Titans were becoming obsolete. And without the rumbling, you would be able to defeat most nations with Titans. Ultimately, by pretty much crumpling and stomping over 80% of the world, the fact that people from Eren's side would be the ones to do it, what would end up happening is the two remaining sides, Paradis and everyone else, would more or less be at equal fighting terms, and what they do with that is pretty much up to them. They would be most likely viewed as heroes, but at the same time, we know what humans do. Humanity is an endless cycle of violence. No matter how long peace is around, eventually violence will pop up. And what I really enjoyed about the extra panels that Isayama drew, the extra pages, there was a few things. He clarified some things with Ymir towards Mikasa. He also added what pretty much ended up happening in terms of the future. And we get even more of those panels in the credits, so we get to see that ultimately Mikasa, Armin, they did live a full life. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. At first, you see them all visit his grave, but over time, you actually see Mikasa with a cane, right? We see them visibly older. It's hard to see because it's like a small little box in terms of the credits, but they do clarify that what ended up happening, well, it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be probably 10 years from when Eren died, but he did bring about a temporary sense of peace. And like what Armin wanted to do, we have to try. We have to try for that peaceful outcome. And even though peace doesn't last forever, as we see technology advance, it became full-on nuclear warfare. At the very least, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily happy or sad. It's one of those situations where 80% of the world is dead. His people did get to have as peaceful of a life as they could. The Titan curse was removed for them. They got to live as fulfilling lives as they could, but the sins would drag them to hell. And I like the idea of Armin pretty much saying that they're going to be together forever because, had he not shown him the book, had he not opened his mind to the possibility of this being even, to explore, would he have ever done that? Would he have ever, let Bertolt live so that his mom would get ate instead? There's so many sins, and it is an emotional burden. And I think whether that's, the uncertainty of why certain things had to go this way. I mean, hell, for Zeke, Zeke has one of the best deaths in this show because, we ultimately had the promise with Levi that he would kill that monkey bastard, and he did so. He's like, Levi! He's just waving with his butt hanging in the air, and ultimately, we stopped the rumbling temporarily. But as we see, there's a lot more to it than just that. The idea that the very last shot of this, some people used to call it sequel bait. It's not sequel bait. It's more so about showing the cycle, whether that's the cycle of humanity always going back to violence, or potentially someone discovering that tree and starting the Titan curse all over again. But for Eren's story and his people's story, it did end, and I think it's a very satisfying end for me. One of the bigger, I think, controversial aspects was what was with Ymir's love to the king, because the king was an abusive piece of garbage. And I think what's really interesting and why Mikasa is like the perfect character to be her freedom is that, whether it's Stockholm Syndrome or just a twisted view of love, love makes you do crazy things and makes you think things that aren't okay are slightly okay or fine. And the idea that for 2,000 years she was a slave to this, and it took until Mikasa, because she's literally the one who killed Eren. Sure, Armin takes credit for it because she goes to bury the head so that he can have a proper funeral, but at the same time, at the end of the day, Mikasa abandoned her love. She still loves Eren, she still didn't want to hurt Eren, but the one person who you believed would never hurt Eren, she would gladly go against the world to protect him, she's the one who cut his head off, and it finally allowed for Ymir to be set free. And I think it's such a brilliant way to kind of like put a nice bow to tie together everything that happened there. The action was fantastic. There was some amazing close-ups. Like there's moments like, the rapid transformation with Peak to Reiner's face, and just like at points it doesn't even feel like he has any flesh left on his face. But man, there was some clean moments. Seeing all the different Titan shifters from different, past people who had the abilities, having so many familiar faces take control because with Pass, everything is connected, so they were able to control their old Titans in order to give us a fighting chance. Oh man, it was so good with the production. Like every time I was like, there's no way they're gonna nail this part, I was like, god damn, when you compare the beginning, like part 1 of season 4, to now where we ended with part 4 of season 4, the fact that the production, they just crafted and perfected a perfect style for a mixture of a lot more 3D with hand-drawn. And honestly, I thought this would be impossible to animate. I really thought they would have to cut a lot more corners. But surprisingly, the hardest things to adapt in the final stretch of Attack on Titan were actually animated better than some of the easier stuff that they struggled with at the beginning of season 4. And it's just like, you know what? The anime community, the anime industry in general, it's difficult. Like they don't have the time. But surprisingly, out of every mappa production right now, Attack on Titan, the one that had arguably the worst production cycle at the start of Mappa's kind of career with Attack on Titan, actually ended up having one of the best productions. Like Jujutsu Kaisen's in worse shape production-wise, not because of what necessarily the episodes are, but just in terms of internal hell. Like they are scrambling with scheduling. And Attack on Titan is just like, you know what? We're going to go out with, hands behind our head and just be like, you know what? We earned this W, and they earned that W indeed. The music, the voice actors, I think the conversation with Armin and Eren and just that emotional baggage is so much better because of the conversation with the voice acting, the music, the lighting. It's remarkable. I am an Attack on Titan fanboy. I will be probably until the day I die. This is my favorite story of all time, and I personally loved what they did. And I could probably gush about it for an hour, but then again, I just been talking about this for an hour and a half in my live reaction, an extra 10 minutes here. I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to cut it off here. Let me know your thoughts on the final final moments of Attack on Titan. Your favorite moment, least favorite, whatever you got to say down below, because this is the last time we're talking about it, at least for now. So let me know your feelings down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Of course, ring that bell so you can get notified when I upload more videos to the channel. And like I mentioned, we have a full live reaction, entire live reaction over on my Patreon for both parts 3 and 4 of the final season. And I also give video shoutouts and other things like that. So consider supporting if you so wish. But until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.